everyone to this webinar on stress relief and creating a healthier brain. And I'm very happy and excited to be able to share this information with you. And I certainly hope that it will be of great value to you in a very practical way. That you take what you learn and actually implement it. So let's begin. I'm going to be presenting some slides for you, and we will go ahead and choose those slides and begin our webinar. So first of all, let me say that I want you to be able to really get some new perspective on what it means to promote your brain health by taking a comprehensive look at the whole issue of stress and stress relief. Of course, we recognize that the problems associated with the health of the brain, meaning the problems of Alzheimer's and other dementias, that this is a growing problem. It's a destruction of brain cells. There are now more than 5 million Americans that have Alzheimer's, the most common form of dementia, and today it's the seventh leading cause of death in the United States. But it's not just the disease of old age. This is the stunning reality. We are now seeing increasing numbers of people. Now it's about 5 to 10% of the folks with this condition have what we refer to as early onset dementia, also known as younger onset, which often appears when a person is in their 40s or 50s. And the trend is definitely in the wrong direction. Now, the good news is that we have the information and the methodology to be able to reduce the risk, and that's the whole point of this webinar. So let's take a look in a little bit more detail. It's a gradual mental decline that basically has to do with the destruction of the neurons. These are the brain cells that lose their ability to function. And as a result, you can see from this scan of the brain over on the left, there's a normal brain well lit up with all kinds of biological, electrical activity. And then over on the right, the Alzheimer's brain is, of course, markedly reduced with regard to its energetic properties. And these brain cells, these neurons, they form these tremendous networks, and the health of the individual brain cell neuron will determine the ability of an electrical nerve impulse to travel throughout the brain neural network. And here we see a very close-up view of what's called the brain cell synapse. Now, this is the ending of one neuron, a nerve cell, and the beginning of the next. And there's this interface and this space between the two, and it's just a fascinating and very complex biology of what goes on in this space between one nerve cell and its neighbor. There are all kinds of what we call neurotransmitters. These are chemicals which allow the transmission of signals, electrical signals, from one brain cell to the next, from one neuron to the next. And this could be a whole webinar in and of itself, explaining all of these various biochemicals, the electrical activity that's occurring on the foundation of the biochemistry. And as a consequence, there's just so much activity going on. And this is just a close-up view of one of these synapses or spaces between two of the cells. Now, taking a look at the challenge that we're facing in terms of, let's say, for example, Alzheimer's, which is the most common form of dementia and which accounts for 50 to 80% of the cases, there are two characteristic findings, what they refer to as amyloid plaques and neurofibrillary tangles. Now, this is a little bit technical, but I'd like you to get at least a little bit of a view of what we're talking about here. This amyloid plaque is a protein that's normally found throughout the body, but for reasons as yet unknown, the protein divides improperly, creating beta amyloid, which is toxic to the neurons in the brain. So there's a toxicity in the brain network, affecting these individual brain cells and a buildup of this amyloid plaque. The neurofibrillary tangles are these long fibers made of protein, which act as kind of structural scaffolds, holding the neurons in proper shape and helping them to transport nutrients within the brain cell. And when these fibers begin to twist and tangle, as you can see in that slide, the neurons lose their shape and they become unable to transport nutrients properly. So you see, we have the plaque, which is the amyloid plaque, which is the buildup of a toxic substance. And then we have the neurofibrillary tangles, which make it difficult to transport nutrients to the brain cells. Now, of course, this is a very complex biology, but as we know from the past, always the pharmaceutical approach is to try to find a way of intervening in terms of a specific drug effect, which will be of benefit to the folks with this kind of problem. But the pharmaceutical approach to managing dementia has largely focused on these plaques and tangles. And even though they actually do have medications which have been shown to create a reduction in the plaques and the tangles, there's not necessarily any significant improvement in the actual cognitive function of the folks taking these medications. So, for example, Dr. Kennedy, the director of geriatric psychiatry at Montefiore's Medical Center in New York, he said back in 2010 at an Alzheimer's conference that both the beta amyloid and the tau protein may be manifestations of the disease and not its origin. Now, what is Dr. Kennedy saying here? That the plaques and the tangles may be the result, but not necessarily its cause. And for us to really get a handle on dementia, we have to be able to get to the cause of the problem. And of course, you want to avoid cognitive decline and memory problems and dementia. That's why you're on this webinar, or you know someone that maybe is beginning to deal with this, or someone that's really at risk. And so to get to the effective solutions, we have to understand the root causes of the problem. So let's take a look at the connection between stress and the decline of brain function, because the cause of these issues like dementia, Alzheimer's, these brain abnormalities, they're caused by a number of different factors. Today, we want to focus in this webinar specifically on the issue between the connection between stress and the decline of brain function. So here we have in the journal Molecular Psychiatry just last year, where the research has demonstrated that chronic stress can damage brain structure and connectivity. That chronic stress and high levels of cortisol create long-lasting brain changes. Here's clear evidence of a connection between stress and the deterioration of brain function. Biological psychiatry back 3 years ago, they talked about adverse life events can reduce the brain's gray matter. This was a Yale University study, and this occurred even in healthy individuals, you see. So these impact of stress is happening even in what we would regard as healthy individuals. And another study, 2011, where again, people with long-term psychological stress tend to develop earlier and more serious forms of physical illnesses that usually hit people in older age, such as strokes, dementia, heart disease, and diabetes. So again, psychological stress, its connection with a general decline or an increased risk in other chronic disease. So we know that part of what happens when people are under stress is there can be emotional eating that occurs, and particularly with the food supply being as highly processed as it is, that this is a very significant cause of the metabolic syndrome, which is a spiking of the blood sugar, a consequential spiking of insulin to try to compensate for the elevated blood sugar. And as a consequence of this, what is referred to as metabolic syndrome, we have a whole host of chronic problems, including type 2 diabetes, obesity, all the cholesterol problems, heart attacks, strokes, certain types of cancer, and there we see Alzheimer's and other dementias, and anxiety and depression. All of these things are interconnected with metabolic function at the cellular level, part of which is being driven by this metabolic syndrome as a result of the consumption of highly processed food. Another very important connection between stress and our brain is this whole issue of gut inflammation and what is referred to as leaky gut. Now, what we are talking about here is the impact of psychological and physical stress disturbing the lining of the gastrointestinal tract. And as a result of this, there's an increased absorption of potentially toxic material, infectious agents, bacteria, other kinds of metabolic toxins, food toxins, environmental toxins can prematurely, and even pre-digested food particles, all of this can enter the bloodstream through a disrupted lining of the gastrointestinal tract. And this creates all kinds of problems, not least of which is the impact on the blood-brain barrier. So while many people have now been hearing about leaky gut, the science on this is now pointing to a connection between a leaky gut and a leaky brain, meaning that blood-brain barrier, which normally keeps the brain protected away from bacterial components and damaging chemicals that enter the circulation as a result of a leaky gut, these are now leaking into the brain. And that some of the same mechanisms that give rise to a leaky gut can create a leaky brain. So we can see that there's a tremendous relationship and interconnection between what's happening in the gut, what's happening in the cells generally, what's happening in the brain, and all of this can be addressed as we are always advocating through certain changes in our lifestyle patterns, and we'll get into that a little bit later in the webinar. So the bottom line here is that the processed, nutrient-depleted food, particularly the sugars and the grains, and of course the trans fats, these kind of artificial processed, which really can't call them foods because they're just artificial food, and then environmental toxins and stress. These all are causing this injury and inflammatory state at the cellular level, which is kind of ongoing, persistent, chronic, low-grade inflammation at the cellular level is now being linked through the science of the last 10 or 15 years with heart attacks, cancer, Alzheimer's, and Time magazine said, and other diseases. It's probably 100 other diseases. So this inflammation is not only caused by stress, but can actually result in stress and depression, anxiety, things like attention deficit disorder, hyperactivity disorder. All of these things are interconnected because of the impact of our highly processed food, the exposure to the toxins, and mental and emotional stress. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, what about genetics? You know, when I went to medical school at Columbia University, I would often ask, you know, the professors of the various organ systems. We'd study about the kidneys, we'd study about the liver, we'd study about the lungs. And I would ask, well, what are the causes of the chronic conditions that we have associated with these various major organs? And you know, usually the answer back then, of course, this was in the late 60s, was, well, it's genetic. You know, the chronic disease is largely a genetic problem. Well, now here we are, 2015, and we realize that actually there's much more to the story of chronic disease than just our genetic background. Yes, we have the genes which create the tendencies, the vulnerabilities, the susceptibilities, but the new science of epigenetics, epi means beyond genetics, is revealing how genes are turned on and off by epigenetic factors like the choices we're making around food and exercise. And yes, how we're thinking, our mindset, stress, all of these things have an epigenetic impact on our genes and genetic inheritance. So we could say, well, okay, maybe the genes are 5, 10, 15, 20% of the equation, but that leaves like 80, 90, 95% of the equation is epigenetic. And the good news, that means it's largely within our control. So we want to be able to understand what we can do proactively to reduce the inflammation, which is associated with an excess of these unstable free radical elements, which occur as a result of what's referred to as oxidative stress. This is really kind of like the process when you see an apple exposed to the air becoming rotten, or iron rusting, or fats going rancid. All of these are oxidative processes. That is to say, the apple rotting, the iron rusting, the oil going rancid are all as a result of an oxidative process involving free radicals. And talking about rancid fats, we know that the brain itself is largely made up of fat. 50 to 60% of the brain itself is made up of fat. The myelin sheaths and all the various components, when we think about the importance of healthy fats in the diet, for every cell, the cell membranes of every cell contain the essential fats, the good fats. Well, in the brain, it's 50% of the brain and the nerves. They're easily damaged by free radicals and oxidative stress. And that's why it's so vitally important that we understand what we can actually do, again, preventatively, to reduce the risk. So what we're trying to accomplish here is to quench this smoldering. We can refer to it as a kind of smoldering inflammatory fire within. When it affects the brain, of course, then we're talking about brain deterioration, and we're talking about dementia and Alzheimer's. And the whole idea is to quench this inflammatory fire within, reduce the inflammation before we're confronted with catastrophic disease. Like in this slide over on the left, it's a low-grade burning that you could probably handle with just some water or a fire extinguisher. But if you let it go, then it's become much more serious. And then over on the right, you've got a blazing inferno that requires, of course, the emergency situation. And that's what we want to avoid in terms of health catastrophes. So let's take a look here at how we can approach the issue of stress relief as it relates especially to the inflammation driving the dementias and brain challenges. So because stress is both a cause and a result of cellular inflammation, we want to reduce the inflammation. We want to address both the physical as well as the psychological aspects of the cause of stress. Normally we think of stress as just a kind of mental emotional state. We're stressed out, we're pressured. And of course, that's very common. At the same time, the science is telling us that stress will not only promote inflammation, but inflammation itself will actually is one of the causes of depression and Alzheimer's and dementia. So we know that inflammation is both a result of and in some ways even a cause of the problem. So we want to address it both physically and psychologically. And so to do this, we begin with the foundation of our physical health and well-being, which is a healthy diet. And everyone's heard this, everyone knows this. Again, it's a matter of implementation, but hopefully understanding the impact of real food on your brain health and and that will be a strong motivator to be able to help you to actually make the positive changes in your choice of foods, because this is so foundational to be able to eat anti-inflammatory foods, and substitute real, healthy, unprocessed, natural food, so that the cells can get the nutrition that they require. Whole, organic, unprocessed food. Seafood, meats, poultry, from wild, grass-fed and hormone-free. Again, fruits and vegetables, ideally organic. The more colorful, the better. Lots of fiber. Not the grains that are wheat or wheat derived, but grains like brown rice, quinoa, these kind of fiber-rich foods, which will help with gastrointestinal function and all, and of course the omega-3 fats. So we have the cold water river fish, salmon, sardines, and halibut. Again, we want all of these foods to be as clean as possible, because we know the toxicity in seafood, the toxicity in meat products, and also, as much as possible, we want the food to be clean. We want it to be ideally organic. Now, in terms of the gastrointestinal health, which we pointed out, if we're having problems with the lining of the gastrointestinal tract, this can promote the leaky gut and the leaky brain, then the dementia as a consequence. So the whole issue of the health of our digestive system, what the health of the community of microorganisms that live in our gastrointestinal tract, what's referred to as the microbiome, 500 to 1,000 species of friendly bacteria living in the human gut. There are at least 10 times as many bacteria as there are human cells in the body. So literally, you've got a community of friendly bacteria in the gut that are absolutely vital to your health and well-being. And the science on this is pointing to the connection between the gut and the brain, signaling pathways. And that's why it's so important to have a healthy gastrointestinal flora. That's the flora, means the community of friendly bacteria, because there are signaling pathways between the gut and the brain. And here in this neurogastroenterology and motility research published in 2011, they were talking about the ability of the gut microbiota, that's the microbiome, to communicate with the brain and therefore affect and modulate behavior. And they're seeing this as a leading edge, exciting concept in health and disease. So we want to proactively fortify our gut with healthy bacteria. We want to take probiotic supplements. We want to consume probiotic foods, fermented vegetables, sauerkraut, kimchi. These are all loaded with friendly bacteria. We also want to add some prebiotic foods, things like artichokes, garlic, beans, onions, asparagus, that help to feed the friendly community of microorganisms. Also, there are certain nutrients that we ideally, high quality nutritional supplements, resveratrol. Again, they looked at this at the university, the Medical College of Cornell University. And there's a lot of research on resveratrol and brain health. This particular study was supporting the concept that the onset of neurodegenerative disease, including things like dementia, may be delayed or mitigated with the use of what they're calling dietary chemoprotective agents that protect against this amyloid plaque and the oxidative stress. So you see they're talking about studying things like resveratrol and its impact on protecting against the plaque formation and the free radical damage or oxidative stress. Turmeric is a wonderful, wonderful anti-inflammatory herb that you can incorporate into your nutritional dietary eating habits, patterns of daily living. The active ingredient, the coursimonoids, is actually a wonderful way to help protect your brain. It has powerful antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, beneficial effects to the circulatory system. And for example, major university medical centers, this one, the University of Maryland, saying that they may help prevent and treat neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and then Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, and other conditions. This is coming out of major university medical centers, that an herb like turmeric, what you can get in any of your natural food markets, this kind of food is so valuable in terms of protecting your brain. Coconut oil. Again, a study published in Neurobiology of Aging back in 2004, that's 11 years ago. They were looking at the consumption of the coconut oil, and it led to improvements, even in some cases, immediate improvement in brain function in patients with milder forms of Alzheimer's. So this can be of help to people in the early stages of Alzheimer's, also as a preventive, as a way of reducing the risk. Exercise, vital for our health and well-being. I love the mind-body kind of exercises because they connect both the psychological and the physiological, the mind-body connection, yoga, tai chi, qigong, or everyday movement, including walking, gardening, biking. Really, the bottom line is you want to find some form of exercise that you enjoy doing so that you'll actually do it. And then we also have some newer modalities, for example, electromagnetic field technology. This is based on the underlying bioelectromagnetic energy fields that we normally recognize in diagnostic technology with things like an electrocardiogram, which is picking up the energy fields from the heart, the electroencephalogram, which is picking up the energy field from the brain, and of course, things like the MRI, the magnetic resonance imaging. These are utilizing electromagnetic field principles, and it's used extensively for diagnostic purposes, but now there's more and more research into how these technologies can be used for promoting health, for treating conditions. And here in a panel report at the National Institutes of Health's Office of Alternative Medicine, which has now actually become the Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine. But back in 1993, this panel report was saying, quote, bioelectromagnetics essentially underlies the biochemistry of the body, in that the biochemical reactions of biological importance are mediated by the electromagnetic force. So what they're saying is that all of the biochemistry, which is what we are kind of recognizing more and more through nutritional science and all, the biochemistry of the body, there's an underlying electromagnetic phenomena, a bioenergetic phenomena occurring that's foundational to the biochemical and to the structural components of the body. And we have science that clearly points to the improvement in microcirculation, that is to say, an increase in the circulation through the very most tiniest of blood vessels that provides blood flow, which means nutrients, and removal of toxic waste products from the cells. How this microcirculation is significantly improved through these proven technologies to increase nutrition and oxygen supply to the cells, and to enhance a greater elimination of toxins from the cells. And all of this is very exciting because with regard to our brain health, we now know that the brain, it's not static, it's not fixed, it's what is referred to in the science as neuroplasticity. These are changes in neural pathways which are due to changes in the environment and in our behavior. So this neuroplasticity is a concept that has replaced the idea that the brain is a physiologically static organ, that things are there kind of just without any ability to change. Now we recognize that even the brain, there's such a fluidity, there's such an opportunity, a possibility of beneficial change that can occur, even being driven by our mental and emotional states. And the whole idea is the power of the mind to shape the brain. Dr. Schwartz at the UCLA School of Medicine In his book, The Mind and the Brain, he talked about by focusing attention away from negative behaviors and towards positive ones. And of course, behavior is driven by ultimately our mindset and our attitude. Well, patients were able to make permanent changes to their own neural pathways. That is very, very exciting. Here we see changes in the heart rate variability, which means the way that the heart is functioning by shifting from frustration to appreciation. Changing from a mental emotional state of frustration to appreciation brings a dramatic shift in the pattern of the heart rhythms. You can see going from frustration to appreciation brings a very erratic pattern to a very coherent pattern. This actually will affect the brainwave activity. Here you see from a heart rate variability pattern, which is much more coherent on the top, we get a much more coherent brainwave activity, and this affects the immune system, it affects the hormonal system. All of these things are interconnected. So one of the most powerful things that we can do is to develop a lifestyle centered on emotional, mental attitudes like gratitude and appreciation. You know, we've known intuitively for thousands of years that having a grateful attitude is going to be beneficial to our health. I mean, we have biblical references to this, of course, and now the science is confirming it. Here in the Frontiers in Psychology, just this year, October 2015, this was research conducted at the University of Southern California, where they used MRI brain imaging to map the biological effects of gratitude. And they saw all kinds of positive benefits when the brain feels gratitude. So this is something to not just kind of intellectually understand, oh yes, gratitude is good for my brain health, but to really be able to put into practice a routine on a daily basis that shifts our normal kind of everyday kind of mindset and attitude to one where we feel appreciation and gratitude. And from that point of view, stress really, it can be seen as our ally, as our friend, because, you know, it's a symptom. Stress is a symptom. It's a signal that things are out of balance. And if we recognize that stress, when we're feeling stress, that it's not just a matter of kind of coping with it or managing it, but that it can be a signal that we want to really shift into a different relationship with our own thinking. Now, the whole idea of changing your relationship to your own thinking is a very, very important topic in terms of stress relief. I mean, I can't tell you the benefit that I personally have received as a result of learning how to change my relationship to my own thinking. And but I can tell you that it makes a significant difference in terms of my health and sense of well-being. And one of the most important things that I try to share with people and teach people when I meet with them one-on-one, or when I do a consultation over the phone or through a video conference call, this for those that are open to it, to really explore and for you to learn how to change your relationship to your own thinking can be of tremendous, tremendous benefit. I mean, just taking, for example, the issue of solving problems, which most of us, we try to handle by kind of try to figure it out. We have a problem, for example, whatever it might be, a problem in a relationship or a problem with our career or a problem with our health, and we try to figure it out. And we find ourselves under stress through the process of trying to use our rational faculties to figure out the solution to our problem, when we can learn how to back away from trying to figure it out and allow wisdom to come in. So in summary, in terms of stress relief, we talk about the physical as well as the psychological side of this, eating real food, healing the microbiome, using supplements such as resveratrol herbs such as turmeric and coconut oil, building in an exercise program that you can enjoy, exploring electromagnetic field therapy, and then on the more psychological side of things, developing a lifestyle around gratitude and changing your relationship to your thinking. So please consider arranging a personal telehealth video consultation so we can implement this information and much more, which of course I wouldn't be able to get to in a relatively short introductory webinar on this topic. But implementation is the bottom line, because the information is important, it's valuable, it can be hopeful, but at the same time, unless there's a follow through with implementation, we won't get any results. We won't get the practical results. And so here's the contact information that you whereby you can be in touch with me. And let me just conclude the webinar. I'd like to go back to seeing you folks. There we are. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed the presentation. I hope that it's given you food for thought, a lot of ideas that I've shared with you, but I do hope that you'll consider things deeply and kind of back away from being stressed and allow the wisdom and the gratitude to come in. And that also will help you to implement the more physical side of the equation and motivate you to eat the healthier food and to incorporate the other things that we talked about. So I wish you the very best and healthy and happy life, and look forward to our next time together. Thank you very much.